Good evening. It's Tuesday, November 29th. I'm Costantino Tsindas. A chartered plane carrying top-tier Brazilian soccer team Chapecoense to the biggest game in its history crashed in the Colombian mountains, killing 76 people on board. The plane went down on Monday night with 72 passengers and a crew of 9. It was unclear what caused the crash, although local media said the plane had reported an electrical fault shortly before it disappeared off radar screens. A Reuters photographer said the plane split in two, destroying the tail end. Chapecoense from Brazil's top league had been flying to face Atlético Nacional of Medellín tomorrow in the first leg of the Copa Sudamericana final, South America's equivalent of the Europa League. Following the accident, Atlético Nacional offered the championship to Chapecoense. It was the first time the small club from the southern city of Chapeco had reached the final of a major South American club competition. Out of the 6 people who survived, 3 were football players. 1 succumbed to his injuries. Tributes poured in from the global soccer family, and Brazil declared 3 days of mourning. Flight tracking service Flight Radar 24 said the last signal from Flight 2933 had been received at 15,500 feet, about 30 kilometers from its destination. The BAE 146 was produced by a company that is now part of the UK's BAE Systems. The crash evoked memories of other soccer air disasters, including the Munich crash in 1958 that killed 23 people, including 8 Manchester United players, journalists and travelling officials. World governing body FIFA said on Twitter its thoughts were with the victims, their families, fans of Chapecoense and media organizations in Brazil on this tragic day. Cyprus authorities expressed readiness for assistance and condolences to the Turkish Cypriot leadership following a freak accident involving high school students early this morning in the occupied territories on the Kyrenia-Dikomou road. A bus carrying students from a small community to a lyceum in occupied Nicosia collided with a truck near a quarry. The truck driver, who was making a right turn into the quarry, did not see the vehicle. 2 high school girls aged 15 and the bus driver 53 were killed on the scene, while 5 out of the 7 other passengers were injured, 2 critically. Turkish Cypriot leader Mustafa Akinci cut short his participation at a conference in Istanbul and returned to the occupied territories. He said in a tweet that he shares the pain and loss of the families and wished speedy recovery to those injured. President Anastasiadis expressed his deep condolences to the families, while government spokesman Nikos Christodoulidis contacted Akinci spokesman Baris Burcu and expressed the readiness of Cyprus authorities to assist in any way required. Citizens and organizations in the occupied territories said that bad light was a factor in the accident, and this because the so-called government had decided not to change the daylight time. This meant that it was still dark at 7 in the morning. People have started collecting signatures to change the daylight time. Russia said that a Syrian army breakthrough in Aleppo had dramatically altered the situation on the ground, allowing more than 80,000 civilians to obtain humanitarian aid after years of being used as human shields by rebels. Moscow is helping forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad to try and take back full control of the shattered city by providing training, equipment, advice and intermittent air support. Yesterday, the Syrian army and its allies announced the capture of a large swathe of eastern Aleppo from rebels in an accelerating attack that threatens to crush the opposition in its most important urban stronghold. The advance has stirred concern in the West about the fate of Aleppo's entrapped civilian population. France called for a UN Security Council meeting to try and end hostilities there, and politicians and officials in Britain, Germany and the United States have all spoken of their worry that civilians are being killed. A full siege is developing in Mosul as poor families struggle to feed themselves after prices rose sharply following the US-backed offensive on the Islamic State-held city in northern Iraq. Some of the poorest families are finding it hard to feed themselves, while others are hoarding and hiding food as they expect prices to rise further, with the battle that started 6 weeks ago taking hold of the city. Iraqi government and Kurdish forces surround the city from the north, east and south, while popular mobilization forces A coalition of Iranian-backed Shiite groups are trying to close in from the west. More than 1 million people are still believed to live in parts of Mosul under the control of the Islamic State fighters, who seized the largest city in northern Iraq as part of a lightning advance across a third of the country in 2014. And finally, leaders of Cuba's leftist allies and other developing countries arrived in Havana for a mass rally commemorating Fidel Castro, the rebel who seized power in the 1959 revolution and ruled the island for half a century. Castro, who ceded control to his younger brother Raúl a decade ago due to poor health, died on Friday. He was 90. For many, especially in Latin America and Africa, he was a symbol of resistance to imperialism, having ousted a US-backed dictator and a champion of the poor. Others condemned him as a tyrant whose socialism ran the island's economy to ruin. Cuba announced 9 days of mourning, including the rally this evening in Havana's Revolution Square, the same massive space where Castro once delivered rousing marathon speeches. Overcast skies tomorrow with showers and isolated storms. Winds will be light to moderate westerly to southwesterly force 3 to 4 and in certain regions strong force 4 to 5 over slight seas. Temperatures will reach 17 degrees Celsius inland, 19 in coastal regions and 9 over the mountains.